ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರೆ. ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಹಿಸ್ಟೋರಿಯನ್ ಸೊಸೈಟಿ, ಇತಿಹಾಸ ದರ್ಪಣ ಹಾಗೂ ಋತುಮಾನ.com ಸಂಯುಕ್ತ ಆಶ್ರಯದಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೀತಾ ಇರತಕ್ಕಂತಹ ಅರಿವಿನ ನೀರಿಗೆ ಆನ್ಲೈನ್ ಉಪನ್ಯಾಸ ಸರಣಿಯ 16ನೇ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ತಮ್ಮರಿಗೆಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕೂಡ ಸುಸ್ವಾಗತ. ಇವತ್ತು ನಮ್ಮ ನಡುವೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ ರಘುರಾಮರಾಜು ಅವರು. ರಘುರಾಮರಾಜು ಸರ್ ಅವರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅನೇಕರಿಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಅವರ ಎರಡು ಸುಪ್ರಸಿದ್ಧವಾದ ಕೃತಿಗಳು, ಒಂದು ಡಿಬೇಟ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ ಫಿಲಾಸಫಿ 2014 ನಲ್ಲಿ ಆಕ್ಸ್ಫರ್ಡ್ ಇಂದ ಬಂದಂತ ಕೃತಿ, ಮತ್ತು ಡಿಬೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಗಾಂಧಿ ಎ ರೀಡರ್ 2014 OUP ಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿರುವ ಕೃತಿ, ಮತ್ತು ಡಿಬೇಟಿಂಗ್ ವಿವೇಕಾನಂದ ಕೃತಿ ಮೂಲಕ, ಮತ್ತು ಮಾಡರ್ನಿಟಿ ಇಂಡಿಯನ್ ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ಥಿಯರಿ ಮೂಲಕ ಅವರು ಭಾರತದಾದ್ಯಂತ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿಕ್ ವಲಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಪ್ರಖ್ಯಾತರು. ಆದರೂ ಕೂಡ ಸಭೆಯ ಮರ್ಯಾದೆಯ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಅವರನ್ನು ಔಪಚಾರಿಕವಾಗಿ ಪರಿಚಯ ಮಾಡೋದು ನಿಮ್ಮೆಲ್ಲರ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ. ಆ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ನಾನು ಅವರ ಪರಿಚಯವನ್ನು ಮಾಡಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಆರಂಭ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸರ್ ಪರಿಚಯ, ಅವರ CV ಸರಿಸುಮಾರು 35 ಪುಟಗಳ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ತುಂಬಾ ದೊಡ್ಡದಾದಂತಹ CV ಇದು ಪರಿಚಯ. ಅದನ್ನ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಸಂಕ್ಷಿಪ್ತಗೊಳಿಸಿ 4 ಪುಟಕ್ಕೆ ಇಳಿಸಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಅದನ್ನ ಓದಿ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ರಘುರಾಮರಾಜು ಸರ್ ಅವರು he did his PhD through Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Kanpur. He is teaching Indian philosophy, social and political philosophy, science, technology and society. Presently he is working at Humanities and as professor in Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Tirupati, Andhra Pradesh. Earlier he used to work in Hyderabad Central University as a philosophy professor. Some of his appointments: he was principal investigator, e-content development for philosophy subject for EPG Pathshala of UGC in 2014-2016. Choice outstanding academic title 2007 for the book Debates in Indian Philosophy, Classical, Colonial and Contemporary. He was Indian Institute of Advanced Study Shimla Fellow for the year of 1993. He was the advisor for Deleuze studies in India. Deleuze andre French philosopher on Deleuze studies in India. He was commissioned to write a monthly column to the newspaper The Telegraph, Kolkata. He was also visiting faculty for Department of Philosophy and Humanities, School of Communication, Manipal University for two years, starting from 2013 to 2017. He was also visiting faculty for International Institute of Information Technology, Hyderabad, on 2002 to 2007 and 2013. Visiting professor for Sri Aurobindo Studies, Department of Philosophy, Jadavpur University, Kolkata. Department of Philosophy, Smith College, Southampton, United States of America during October 2009. Visiting professor for Department of Political Science, Delhi University during March 2010. He was also served in Indian Institute of Technology, Tirupati during 2017. He worked as the member of editorial board for a lot of journals across India and globe. Majorly, he was a member of Journal of World Philosophies that is published by Indiana University, Bloomington, America. He was also the member of editorial board for Plurologue, Politics and Philosophy Reviews. He was the series editor for Porugu Nuchi Telugu Loki, Charcha Kosam, Vimarsa Kosam. This series is meant to translate 100 books from other languages into Telugu. The main focus is on the books written on the post-independent India, starting from 2010. The series was already published, 40 books. The series is published by MSCO, a well-known publication of Vijayawada. His major publications: one, Existence, Experience and Ethics, that is published by DK Print World, New Delhi in 2000. Debates in Indian Philosophy, Classical, Colonial and Contemporary, that is published by Oxford University Press, New Delhi and New York. In 2006, 2007, it means it had a lot of editions. In 2008, 10, 12, 13, 14, and it also won Choice Outstanding Academic Title in 2007. Debating Gandhi, a reader, he edited through Oxford University Press. That is in 2018, 16 basically, again reprinted in 2018, 10, 13, 14. Enduring Colonialism, Classical Presences and Modern Absences in India Philosophy, that is published through Oxford University in 2009, again reprinted in 2011. Grounding Morality, Freedom, Knowledge and Plurality of Cultures, he edited with another very important contemporary Indian scholar, that is Jyotirmay Sharma. Is working in Hyderabad Central University, that is published through Routledge, New Delhi in 2010. Modernity in Indian Social Theory, that is published through Oxford University in 2011, again reprinted in 12 and 2015. His book Ramachandra Gandhi, The Man and His Philosophy, published through Routledge in 2013, New Delhi. Philosophy and India, Ancestors, Outsiders and Predecessors, published to OUP Press, 2013. Debating Vivekananda, a reader. It's one of the incredible book on Vivekananda. He compiled and edited in 2014. 7 Sages, Selected Essays of Ramachandra Gandhi. He edited this book through Penguin, New Delhi in 2015. Modern Frames and Pre-Modern Themes in Indian Philosophy. Border, Self and Other, published through Routledge, London and New Delhi, both versions in 2017. Desire and Liberation, Biography of a Text by Veddara Chandidasa, published through Oxford University in 2018. Calibrating Western Philosophy for India, Rousseau, Derrida, Deleuze, Guattari and Veddara Chandidas, published to Routledge, London and New York editions in 2009. The Prince by Machiavelli, that is published to South Asian Press in 2020. Maidanam Lotul Loki, Postmodern Parishilana, published is a Telugu book published by one of the Vijayawada's prestigious publishing house, MSCO publication in 2013 and reprinted in 2011. Veddara Chandidasa, Darshanamu Sahityamu, again published by MSCO publication in 2019 in Telugu. So these are the major books of Professor Raghuram-Raju. I don't want to, read out all the papers and chapters which he written and contributed for a lot of books across India and globe for various publication houses, because it nearly crosses 100 in number. That's why I majorly cited his works, and he was member in various committees. One is member Advisory Committee, National Library, Kolkata, Ministry of Department of Culture, Government of India. Committee member of National Council of Rural Institutes, Ministry of Human Resource Development, HRD. Member Board of Studies, Philosophy and Humanities, Manipal University. Member of Advisory Committee, UGC SAP, Department of Philosophy, Allahabad University, Allahabad. Member Advisory Committee, UGC SAP, Gandhian Studies, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. Member Advisory Committee, Center for Canadian Studies, Gita University, Visakhapatnam. Board of Studies, Department of Philosophy, Goa University. Member Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi. Member Academic Audit Committee, Department of Philosophy, Goa University. Member Editorial Board, Geetam Journal of Gandhian Studies, Visakhapatnam. Member Review Committee Evaluating Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, ISER, Mohali. Member Senate, Indian Institute of Technology, Tirupati. member Board of Studies, Department of Philosophy, Bengaluru Central University, member Ethics Committee, ISER, Tirupati, member Board of School of Education and Humanities, Mizoram University, Mizoram. He was also, contributed for as a reviewer for outstanding publication houses across globe and India, like Oxford University, Rutledge, Springer, Verlag, Bloomsbury, Orient Blackswan, Sage Publication, Continuum International Publication, London, Peter Lang, South Asian plus New Delhi. And he has contributed and edited a lot of journals like Journal of World Philosophy, Sophia, Journal of Indian Council of Philosophical Research, Sociological Bulletin, Economic and Political Weekly, Philosophy East and West, Indian Philosophical Quarterly, Studies in Indian Politics. I think this is enough to introduce Professor Raghuramaraju sir, and a greater introduction only can happen after reading his great works, especially debating Gandhi and modernity and debating Vivekananda. Professor, I welcome you on behalf of Bengaluru Historians Society, Itihasa Darpana, and Rutumana.com, and the prestigious audience who gather here. Welcome, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pradeep, for that generous introduction. I thank Bengaluru Historians Society for this kind invitation. I have fond memories of Karnataka, particularly Bengaluru, when I was closely associated with people like Professor Anantamurthy, Professor D.R. Nagaraj, and Sundar Sarukai, and also is associated, as Pradeep rightly mentioned, with Manipal University Department of Philosophy and Humanities. So I'm very, very happy. I'm very happy to be here, and I am also a bit nervous because I am now talking to historians and also online. So, these are the two important things that I'm not used to. But I'll try to make as much as possible. Let me begin by stating certain parts or sections of this presentation. The first one is what I call as clearing the path. Suppose if I am discussing or lecturing on any Western philosopher, then I don't have to give I don't have to clear the path. Things are very clearly laid down, and then you straight away go to the point of the discussion or start talking about the topic assigned to you. But the scene in India is not, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, like that. So you have to clear the path in order to arrive at the site of discussing the theme that is announced. And one way to begin clearing the path is to make a beginning, and that beginning could be that what is happening in humanities and social sciences within the academic institutions in India. We all belong to that great, we inhabit that domain. So it is necessary to ask, to be self-reflective about ourselves. So one way of looking at is, when you sit on many of these committees, you get the feeling that Indian academics in humanities and social sciences are prospering, and we are doing very fantastic work. So the prosperity, is one way of looking at the nature of humanities and social sciences in India. The other one is to look at this through the idea of complacency, that things are not great, but that's okay. I mean, we are not, we are happy with what we are doing. We are not contributing great things to either to the nation at the national level or at the global level. though we have the resources at the global level and also facilities at the national level. So we're okay. There's nothing to feel great and nothing to feel depressed either. So prosperity is one way of looking at our activity. Complacency is another way of looking at our activity. And there is another way through which we can look at our activity, and that is crisis. The humanities and social sciences in India are in crisis. Whether this is because of the crisis globally to the subjects, or we have added, or whatever it is, a very debatable question. So that is something that we need to reflect. To repeat: prosperity, complacency, and crisis. As I pointed out, that if it is a crisis, then is this crisis internal to India? Is because of the internal activities within India that contributed to this crisis, or they're external to the social sciences and humanities in India? Something happened from outside, and we are the victims of this, and we are now facing crisis. So that there are two parameters that we need to look carefully. One is, and we don't generally make that distinction, namely, are we contributing in quantity, or are we contributing in quality? Many times when I sit in these selection committees and assessing the departments and things like that, you get a whole lot of research work dumped down you, which is quantity, number. There's a number of publications, number of books, number of teaching and things like that. So which is a good thing. So people are active, people are doing work, they're publishing. So quantity is one important parameter. But then there is also quality, which also can really draw on us when we're making this assignment. That's my first step in this clearing the path, as it were. Now, one of the reasons why we are asking this question is that if there is a crisis, then what can be the possible agenda for Indian academics to overcome this crisis? And then, what is an agenda that could make us restart our work so that we establish our strengths, we establish our credentials, and we make we progress and we grow. Now, here, let me pause and then take a revisit one of the important parables from Mullah Nasruddin. Mullah Nasruddin was one day found searching for something. And then a passerby asks him, "What are you searching?" Mullah says, "I'm searching for a key that I lost." And then the passerby goes off, and then he completes his work. On his return, he continues to, he sees Mullah continue to search for it. And he also joins him to help him because it is getting dark. And then after some time, he suddenly asks Mullah, "Where did you lose your key?" And Mullah says, "I lost it there." Then he asks him, "If you lost it there, why are you searching here?" And Mullah's answer was, "I am searching here because there is light." Now, I think one way of understanding the Indian academics is that, are we doing work where there is light? But, that's going to be very futile. You're not going to get the key that you lost. Or suppose if we leave the light and then go into where I lost, but where there is no light, what would happen to me? Will I be able to get the key? That is the paradox that seems to be captured very brilliantly in this parable for me to understand the predicament of academics, particularly humanities and social sciences in India. So my effort has been not to such where there is light, nor such where I lost because there is no light there, but to bring light, move light from where it is to where I lost. In other words, I want to convert this metaphor of light into a candle and then take the candle to a place where I lost my key and then start searching for it. So that's it is through this parable that I enter into the social sciences and humanities in India. Now, one point that comes to our mind when we are thinking about crisis in humanities and social sciences in India is often cited that we are not doing well because of colonialism. Now, but then that is not correct. Think beyond a point. This could be an immediate explanation, but it can't be an enduring explanation. It is not an explanation that can sustain us beyond a point. And the reason why it cannot sustain us beyond a point is, yes, there is colonialism. They came and destroyed us, but then are you ready to be destroyed forever? Or is there a possibility of overcoming this problem and then do something about it? Okay, let me visit some instances of a similar crisis where people, seems to have responded wonderfully and differently. And that is, if you look at Badarayana, who composed Vedanta Sutras, he is the first compiler the world has produced, according to many estimations. He is the one who came up with a very clear methodology of compilation. And one of the reasons why Badarayana has compiled Vedanta Sutras is because of the crisis that Buddhism introduced into Hinduism, particularly in their scathing attack on the Brahmanism that surrounds Vedas and even Upanishads. Okay, so because there is a crisis, Badarayana did not keep quiet. He didn't say that no, Buddhism came and destroyed Vedanta or Upanishadic or the Vedic knowledge systems. He embarked on consolidating the wounded Upanishads by the Buddhism and came up with a very consolidated text that is substantial. So when there is a crisis, people like Badarayana try to overcome it in a very creative way. So that means that the relation between crisis and doom is not a necessary relation. Okay, it's a contingent relation because there is a possibility where crisis can give rise to opportunities, and opportunities can also lead to creativity. So that is the reason why this also happens in the case of Plato. During the time of Plato, there was a terrible unrest in Athens. So that's the reason why, he really wanted to consolidate the thought and the political practices. That's why, he noted down in a very systematic manner the dialogues, and then, how important Plato's dialogues thought to Western thought. So here, I wanted to tread a different trajectory, and namely, how, for instance, adversaries can become enablers. In other words, the crisis can lead to creativity. So I wanted to now tread something different, namely, not to accept opponents, other as an oppressor, but other who is oppressing me, but I use it as enabling me. Let me give two more immediate examples from 20th century. That it is it happened in the case of Swami Vivekananda, who was earlier known as Bhupendranath Datta, that the teacher was teaching them Wordsworth in a school where, in a college where Narendranath Datta was studying. And then this teacher, who is a European, was very unhappy with the students because they are not able to follow the idea of a trance in Wordsworth. So he gets angry and then throws tantrums and goes back to his principal and says that, I don't want to teach these Bengali kids, because they don't understand the Wordsworth poetry. So the principal happens to be Reverend Hasty. And Reverend Hasty comes to the class and says that I came to know that, your teacher is very cut with you because you are not able to follow the idea of a trance. And then he says, as the records give us, that perhaps even your teacher doesn't know what is an idea of a trance. It's a wonderful statement by Reverend Hasty. And then he tells these students, if you really wanted to know what is an idea of a trance, then you should go to Dakshineshwar and meet this person called Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who often gets into the trance. See, there is a very interesting complexity around this suggestion. There are several subtexts that needs to be decoded and expanded. And, you can really write a lot of things on these things. So, Bhupendranath Datta goes, and he meets Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, but he never got back to do a Wordsworth, okay? And then that's become a phenomenal relation between him and his guru. Okay, so you find that Reverend Hasty, who is, father sent to India to convert people, but he changes. Okay, the other, who is a Reverend Hasty, instead of oppressing Swami Vivekananda, enabled Swami Vivekananda to find his own guru, lifelong guru. And it's a very phenomenal guru. So the other can be seen not merely as an oppressor, but also as an enabler. Now, if you think that it's an accidental kind of a thing, I'll give another example. Gandhi was asked by two theosophical people in London whether he has read what he thinks about Bhagavad Gita. At that time, Gandhi confesses, he heard about Bhagavad Gita, knew something about it, but he has not studied it. And he felt very embarrassed. And they give him Bhagavad Gita in translation, called as Light of Asia, the Edwin Arnold's translation. And please remember now, Gandhi reads Bhagavad Gita in translation at the instance of a British people in England. All others, okay, all outsiders, nothing inside. And you can see the relation between Gandhi and Gita is a lifelong relation. You can't think about Gandhi without Gita. And it's a very, very interesting relation. So I don't get into this, other is an oppressor, but other is an enabler. So that's this is how I clear the path, as it were. And now let me get into the next section, which is what is the problem and how to frame the problem. The problem actually is the following for me. And what is it? That many times we are told that we are all victims of what they call as Orientalism. There is this Indology and all kinds of things that came. And where we are, the Indians have been taken for granted. We are as victims, as subjects, for oppression. But I don't accept that consequences. I have clearly scrutinized what is the formula that underlies Oriental attitude, where there is this European self, which is trying to represent the Eastern other. So what Orientalism seems to be telling me in a formula, not in terms of content, is the following: that the Europeans, when they study India, for instance, they study it for their own sake, for their own selfish reasons, for their own political reasons. Okay, so when European studies India, for example, when Louis Dumont studies Indian society and writes this book called Homo Hierarchica. He says right in the beginning of that book that he was not interested in Indian society per se. He wanted to understand what is a non-egalitarian society, given the fact that Europe is given to egalitarianism, a society where there is a hierarchy. And he finds that there is a hierarchy in the caste system in India. So his intention is to find out his intention is, given the fact that Europe is given to egalitarianism, he wants to find out a counter to it, and that is non-egalitarianism, namely hierarchy. And that he found it in India. That's why he studies it. Now, this is also, you find it in, Cambridge historians and a whole lot of other people. So the the Orientalism is critiqued by Edward Said, and then that gave rise to this, what is called as post-colonialism and things like that. So, but I don't like post-colonials or followers of Edward Said. I don't reject Orientalism. In fact, I emulate Orientalism. How do I emulate it? I emulate it in a modified way. And what is the modification? The modification is the following. It is, if Europe is studying India for their own sake, what stops Indians from studying Europe for the sake of India? Okay. Now, the Orientalists cannot say that, no, you can't do that. No, this is your formula. I am only saying that, if you are there and you say that, I'm here, I say that you are there. Okay. It is that, like, you can't say that, that formula works only from one location. You give me same formula, and from a different location, I use the same formula. And then now that's what makes my research agenda clear. So I emulate Orientalism in a sense, not in its manifestation. So let me now gradually move to a very interesting intellectual preoccupation of India since long time. Now, we have spent a lot of time, both in philosophy and in humanities and social sciences, in reading hermeneutics of Bultmann, Gadamer, and also deconstruction of Derrida and others. And if you look at the amount of teaching and research that has gone in India on Derrida and Gadamer, it is a remarkable quantity. Absolutely, a lot of people spent a lot of quality time on this thing. But I found that Derrida or the hermeneutic stalwart Gadamer are finding answers to a problem that they have. So there is a problem, and what is the problem? I'll come to it in a moment. And they have given a solution. Okay, hermeneutics is a solution, deconstruction is a solution. But these two solutions are solutions to a problem. Alternatively, hermeneutics is an answer, deconstruction is an answer, and both hermeneutics and deconstruction as answers have a question, as a problem. And what is that question? That they all faced the oppressiveness of a text. And what is the oppressiveness of a text? That they said that there is Bible, or there is Plato's dialogues, Greek thought, where text becomes a primary thing, and interpretations are not given enough importance. They are in fact looked at as secondary, that can be dispensed with. So you have a very interesting sequence here, namely, there is a single text, and the text is final, and interpretations are treated as secondary. So text is primary, and interpretations are secondary. Okay, and if you have a situation where you have an oppressive text and then authoritative text, and then you have interpretations which are not given importance. Now, reading Gadamer and reading Derrida is very, very soothing. Really, really soothing. They have come up with really a brilliant, very brilliant contribution. I read both of them and then I published and I studied them thoroughly. But then I found that they are profound, but they are not useful to me in India. They are profound. Please remember, from this, I'm not saying that you should not read them. You should read them thoroughly, thoroughly. There's no second opinion about it. But having read them, is it possible to use them? Is that next step? Okay, I found that reading them is very, very important. However, using them was not that promising. So why? I'll tell you the following thing. If you look at Indian philosophy, what are the problems of Indian philosophy? If you look at Badarayana, whom I just alluded some time back, you find a very peculiar situation, a reversal of the phenomenon. Namely, Badarayana compiled Vedanta Sutras, and then Vedanta Sutras are interpreted by Shankara, Nimbarka, Madhava, Ramanuja, and several other people. Now, what do we know today about Indian philosophy? Who are more prominent figures in Indian philosophy? Shankara, Madhava, Ramanuja, to some extent Nimbarka, and other people. How many people know Badarayana, who actually is the person who wrote this text, on which there are these interpretations? So now you have in Indian philosophy a situation where the text, original text, is not primary, is not recognized as much as the interpretations have been recognized. Suppose if I have this kind of a situation where there is a overemphasis and prominence given to interpretation, and the text is not given that much of prominence, is Derrida or Gadamer provide answers to me? And I found that they are not the ones who can be given answers to me. So, though I've read Derrida, I have not tried to get into this. So that is the reason why. Let me come to this is about the classical India and modern Western philosophy. Let's come to the modern India. One of the unique features of Indian national movement is it produced number of politicians who are also writers. They are not authors. This is something which is unique. We have not theorized it beyond a point. In the world history, you have better politicians than politicians of Indian national movement. You have better authors than Indian national movement people. But what you don't have is you don't have that number of people who are not only politicians, active in politics, but also wrote. I call them writers, not authors. So this is an interesting thing that I wanted to explore. So if they are writers, you look, Gandhi's complete works are 100 volumes, Sri Aurobindo 30, Baba Sahib Ambedkar 30 volumes, Swami Vivekananda 10 volumes now, and like that, number of people who are active in politics happen to write extensively. So that is something very unique to India, and that you don't find it anywhere else. However, I wanted to caution you that these people have written, but what they wrote was they are not authors, and they have not produced text. Not all of them, but I'll tell you somebody who has produced a text. I'll come to it in a moment. But largely, that's not the scene. But there is a possibility to transfer these writers into authors. This is the work done by Nagarjuna for Buddha, Shankara for Vedanta, Saint Aquinas for Christianity, Saint Augustine for Christianity. Okay, these are the people who did enough theory to transform the rudimentary pre-authors into authors. So that is the reason why I find that this is something very, very, very interesting domain that is enveloping in India. So let me just make my next move. Why should I study and discuss Indian texts? Now, one might ask the question that, I'm not saying that you should just come back and, read Indian texts, because you can read Indian text out of curiosity. You can read Indian text out of national interest, nationalism. My text, so I will read. And the other thing that can make you to read is you find parallels. A lot of people find parallels between Machiavelli and Kautilya, then Shankara and Plato and things like that. So, but the question that can be asked is, suppose if Kautilya and Machiavelli are same, suppose if I say that I want to read Machiavelli, not Kautilya, you don't have a strong answer. The reason why I read Indian philosophical text, modern Indian philosophical text, modern text written by these writers, is because some of them have some uniqueness, which, if you discuss them, can contribute to the global academic, global academics. So when I read them, there is a problem. Suppose if I'm reading Wittgenstein and all these, nobody will ask me. Suppose if I am working on Indian philosophy people, particularly like Gandhi, Vivekananda, Aurobindo, and Savarkar and other things, they will think that there is something political correctness it comes into you in front of you. I think that's not a correct attitude. I think reading a person need not mean endorsing that person. I think somewhere along the way, we have fallen prey to this formula that if I read somebody, I may be taken to be endorsing it. In fact, people who wrote on fascism are not fascists. Okay, so look at, this is one thing which I learned from Western philosophy, that you can maintain a detachment. You can study somebody without endorsing that. So that's one of the points that I wanted to bring it to your note, to your notice. Given the interpretative and the sex, what makes those that though unique, it is not. So, what is uniqueness? What is a text that is unique? Now, this brings me to Mahatma Gandhi on Gita. Discourse on Gita is a series of talks delivered at Sabarmati Ashram during 1926 to 1927. Though this text is unique, this text is not read carefully by modern interpreters. Though many recognize Gandhi's efforts to make Gita a text of non-violence, they did not pay attention to the scholarly efforts made by him. And what are the scholarly efforts? The scholarly efforts are the following. Now, Gandhi is a votary of non-violence, but he also accepted Gita as a text that is very dear to him. And Gita, till Gandhi, is taken to be a text that endorses violence, because Lord Krishna is asking a reluctant Arjuna to fight war, and war involves violence. So if a text advocates violence, how can a votary of non-violence like Gandhi accept that text as a very important text in his life? So there is a contradiction, and we have not raised this problem, and we have not resolved it. That's why when I talk to many teachers, I ask them, how do you solve this problem? Suppose if your student asks you this question, how can Gandhi advocate non-violence and accept Bhagavad Gita? Many times we don't have an answer. Some people try to answer, like Dipesh Chakravarti and Kapila and other people. But then they recognized this. Gandhi makes converts Gita as a text of non-violence, but they have not paid attention to the scholarly efforts made by Gandhi in converting, in interpreting the text as a text of non-violence. So that is a problem that I have. These are the gaps, serious gaps in the scholarship in India. Now, let me point out to you that Gandhi gave three solid academic reasons to reject all the interpretations on the Gita and make a U-turn to claim that it is a text that positively endorses nonviolence. It's a very, solid. It just looks as if you're reading a very first-rate work on philosophy, and it's a mental exercise. Now, you know that the existing interpretations, including Tilak's Maharaj, is that Gandhi endorses violence and is a legitimate text to use violence to fight against the British. So the interesting feature, another interesting feature that that is there in 19th and 20th century is that there are several nationalist leaders, including Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who rallied around Bhagavad Gita. Interestingly, again, this is one of the important aspects that I don't find a lot of discussion taking place by people who research on Ambedkar, except some reference to it in Aishwarya Kumar's work. That is, Ambedkar claims that Gita is a Buddhist text, and he gives 12 reasons why so. And we need to really look at that. So to get back to my main point, the main point is that there is an extensive rallying around Bhagavad Gita by the 19th and 20th century philosophers. I mean, everybody, most of them wrote. And then, this is also an extensively discussed in several books that have been published on this thing. So there's this is one of the singular texts around which many people rallied around. But even though all the interpretations till then concur on one thing, namely that Gita endorses violence, and then that is positively used by people like Savarkar, Ambedkar, Aurobindo and Tilak for as an important tool, a strategy, resource for fighting against the British. Okay, but Gandhi finds that this is not correct, because he finds that a proper reading of Gita gives you an exactly opposite interpretation. And how does it do it? Before I give you the three solid reasons, he does some, clearing the ground. And one thing that he does is, whether you accept it or not is a different thing, but this is what he does. What he does is that he says that that Gita was not written not for learned, but for all the four castes. Rather, all the 18 castes, says Gandhi, to read and understand. It was written for the Shudras, the Bangis, and for women. In fact, for all the classes. Okay, a regular study of books in the regional language. Okay, I'll come to it later. So he says that he completely rejects that hierarchy and the exclusiveness associated with Gita. And then he says, no, it is not correct. There is a universalism in Gita, and it is written for everybody. So if somebody says that, it is written only for learned people or Brahmin, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and not for Sudras and other people, he says that is an interpolation he will not accept. So he comes up with a very inclusive kind of a thing. That's one move that he makes. He makes another important one, where he says that the best way to read Gita is to read it in regional languages. So he says, regular study of books in regional languages, which are steeped in the spirit of devotion, it should be encouraged. And then he also clarifies that non-violence is not a negative virtue. It is a positive value. So with that, let me now get into the last section, which is what I call as the insight. And it is in this insight cauldron, he cooks up something which is entirely different and academically challenging, scholarly, fascinating. And that is, So he gives three reasons. One reason is already, recognized by many people, and namely that the battle between Pandavas and Kauravas in Bhagavad Gita is not to be taken as a historical one, but as symbolic, figurative. And he says, for instance, Duryodhana and his supporters stand for satanic influence in all of us. So it is not that there are Duryodanas, there are Kauravas, and there are Pandavas, and they are fighting with each other. There is a Duryodhana or Kauravas in each one of us. Okay, so that is the reason why, for instance, the theatre personality like Prasanna has come up with this play where he made everyone to play the role of Godse in that play. So thereby saying that it is not that villain is just outside, villain is all over us. So it is not, so he decentralizes, decenters, that kind of thing. That's one interpretation of Gandhi on this thing. So he says, don't think that Gita is endorsing non-violence. It is only reminding you about don't think that Gita is endorsing violence. It is only reminding the violence in each one of us, and that needs to be self-reflected, and you have to overcome that violence and become non-violence. This is the one interpretation. Many people who wrote on Gandhi recognize this, so there is no problem. But there are two more solid and fascinating arguments that Gandhi gives, which were not, recognized in the scholarship. As far as I know, it could be. It's possible that somebody else has read it, recognized it, but I have not come across this thing. And that is, one is internal to the text, and the second one is external to the text. What is internal to the text is the following. Excuse me. What is internal to the text is that, Gita borrows the metaphysics of Sankhya. Okay. That's why there is a lot of Sankhya and Yoga in Gita. It borrows, and it's based on the metaphysics of Sankhya, and particularly the three gunas. What are the three gunas? The three gunas are Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So they are tripartite. They are not dual. So that's why when they discuss Gandhi's idea of non-violence, most of the time, particularly this happens by the political scientists and social scientists who are used to this liberal, terminology, where they discuss non-violence as opposed to violence. That means underlying that is that they inhabit a dualism, non-violence versus violence. You don't get it. You don't actually get to Gandhi or even to Sankhya when you follow the dualism. Actually, there is a triangular here, and the triangular is laid down by Sankhya. What is a triangular? The triangular is that there is Sattva, there is Rajas, and there is Tamas. Okay, Sattva is at highest quality. Rajas is the middle one, and Tamas is the bottom one. So what is it? It is not Sattva and Rajas, violence and non-violence. There is a third action. It is not only non-violent action and violent action. Non-violent action in Sattva, violent action in Rajas. There is a third kind of action which is unique to Indian philosophy, and that is Tamas, which means inaction. Inaction. Okay. In the triangular between Sattva, Rajas, and in the triangular between Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Just check. Yeah. In the triangular amongst Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, Sattva is at the top, as I said. Rajas is in the middle, and Tamas is at the bottom. Now, what is the level of Lord Krishna's recommendation, persuasion to Arjuna to fight battle, to fight war? Okay, does it correspond to which of these gunas? Okay, does it correspond to sattva? Definitely not. Does it correspond to rajas? Possible. Does it correspond to tamas? Also possible. Okay. According to Gandhi, Arjuna is in, he is a tamasic, not rajasic. Okay. And now, what is happening here is that if there are three gunas, sattva at the top, rajas in the middle, and tamas at the bottom. If Arjuna is at the tamasic level, Krishna is trying to push him to the next level. And what is the next level? Rajas. Okay. So since he is pushing him to moving him to the rajas, there is no evidence to show that there is any action by Lord Krishna to move Arjuna to sattva. There is enough evidence for us in the text to show that Arjuna is at the level of tamas and he is moving him to rajas. So which means what? Which is the highest category? Highest category, highest guna, highest quality is sattva, and the action of Lord Krishna only covers half of it, which is from moving Arjuna from tamas to rajas. So that's the reason why he says it's a very important thing to quote. But to conclude from this, that the Gita teaches violence or justify war is as unwarranted as to argue that since violence in some form or other is inescapable for maintaining the bodily in existence, dharma lies only in violence. So that's the point that Gandhi is trying to make. So I'm just trying to extrapolate some things in the next point, but let me just recall that Gandhi gives three solid reasons, academic, scholarly reasons, to show that text, the Gita is a text that endorses non-violence and rejects violence. And the first one, which is generally known, many people have accepted it, is that don't take the text literally, treat it as figuratively, and then you will find that that there is the Kauravas are there in each one of us. So we need to recognize that and overcome it. That's the first one. Second one is, now if you accept that Sankhya, Gita borrows Sankhya metaphysics, then you realize that all that is there in Gita covers only two gunas, and they are bottom gunas. One is the tamasic, the other one is rajasic. There's no evidence to show that there is an indication where there is an effort by Lord Krishna to move from rajasic to sattvic. So that's the reason why the Gita is not a complete text in this respect. I'm just extrapolating something here and there. Not everything is said by Gandhi, but you can always piece and infer from this. Now, I do more extrapolation while discussing the last point, which is an amazingly creative thing. I was really shocked when I read the discourse on Gita. And that is that he, as I said, the second point is about the internal to the text. What is internal? Sankhya metaphysics. The third one is external to the text. And this is really, Gandhi uses really a flight of imagination and really opens his academic excellence in here. And what is it? It is the following. That is that he says that Gita is part of a larger text, which is Mahabharata. Okay. Now, so Gita is not a text in itself. It's one aspect of a larger text called Mahabharata. And what does Mahabharata, Mahabharata has? One of the important aspects of Mahabharata is Kurukshetra's war. And definitely to that extent, Gita is an important part of Mahabharata. So you cannot say that, I will read Mahabharata without Kurukshetra. That makes no sense. Okay. So even though there is a lot of other things, and Gita is a part of Mahabharata, but it's an important part, inalienable part of Mahabharata. Fine, that Gandhi accepts. But then Gandhi does something very interesting. He says that there is a need to move from contents of a text to the context of the text. I'll repeat again. There is a need to move from, here I'm doing some extrapolation of my own to build a scaffold in order to make the point that I'm trying to make. That is, the text has contents. Text also has a context. Text has contents and text has context. Okay. What is the content of the either the part, the Gita, or the whole Mahabharata? Violence, war. Kurukshetra war is the most important, the pinnacle of Mahabharata lies in Kurukshetra war. All other things are okay, the all other things are very important, that, this and that, but this is the pinnacle. But so that's about the contents of the epic. But then he raises a very important point, namely, what is the context of the narration of Mahabharata? What is the context of narrating Mahabharata by Vaisampayana, the sage Vaisampayana? It is the sage Vaisampayana who is the preceptor, whose preceptor is Vedavyasa. It is the Vaisampayana whose preceptor is Vedavyasa, who narrates Mahabharata to Janamejaya, who is the son of Parikshit. And what is the context of this narration? The context of narration is Janamejaya, who is the son of Parikshit and also grandson of Arjuna, was threatening to kill all the snakes because he wants to take revenge on the snakes, who caused this thing to his father. And then Janamejaya, Vaisampayana, stops Janamejaya and then narrates this great, incident in the history of India, namely Mahabharata. And what is the purpose of narrating the Mahabharata by Vaisampayana to Janamejaya? To commit violence or refrain from committing violence? This is the question that Gandhi asks. This is the brilliant move by Gandhi. The context of narrating Mahabharata by Vaisampayana to Janamejaya is to dissuade Janamejaya from killing, which is violence, killing the snakes. And why does he stop him? What is his reason for stopping him? He says that in the past, your ancestors fought a war which involved violence. And in that war, neither side were the winners. So violence does not take you anywhere. It only takes you to the teeth of destruction and death. Okay? So you should not commit violence, which means you should not kill the snakes. That means you should not follow the path of your forefathers who did a blunder, So this is something where Gandhi moves from the contents of the epic to the context of the epic and makes a brilliant use of the tension, the incompatibility, the mutual exclusion between the content of Mahabharata and the context of narrating Mahabharata. This is a brilliant academic move. It's a brilliant academic move. And that is and it's unfortunate that we have not paid attention to this, which is there in front of us. You understand now why I gave the example of Mullah Nasruddin? Okay, it is there. We have lost it somewhere else, but we have not recognized it because we are all doing, where there is light. Our scholarship is driven by the availability of light, not, searching for a key which we have lost. So it is this interpretation, as I said, that makes me to read this Indian text, modern Indian text, not because Gandhi is a national leader, I am an Indian, then so I have to read Indian books, and which is fine, or I'm just curious about it, or something else. Oh, it is there, and that is also there, and things like that. No, I read these texts because they are unique. If they are not unique, I will not be interested in reading them. Because if I read Plato, I read them because Plato is unique. And I can teach Plato to Indian students. If I am interested in Badarayana, he is unique. That's why and I read them so that I can teach them to the global students, not just Indian students. Of course, Indian students I teach, but also my platforms are the global platforms. That's the reason why I have decided that if I write anything on Indian philosophy or India, I want it to be published by the best publishers, global publishers. Otherwise, I'm not interested in publishing it. Because, that's why one of the titles of my book is Modern Frames and Pre-Modern Themes. Okay, that's what has happened. So, let me just, so this move by him from moving from contents to the context turns the table or makes them topsy-turvy to claim that Gita advocates non-violence. In this text, Gandhi emerges as an author par excellence. So he's not just a writer. No, writer of 100 volumes of Gandhi are one side, and this interpretation discourse on Gita is another thing. However, what may be the reason this uniqueness eluded attention of readers by Gandhi? That is, one of the reasons why we have not recognized these things is because we have lost in this reading our own text out of curiosity, out of emotions, out of nationalism, which is fine. I mean, I'm not saying there is anything wrong, but if you really wanted to present them, pack them, and parcel them to the thing, you really need to pay attention to the structural aspects of Indian thought so that it makes good sense. One of the reasons why we are not able to read these texts carefully and make good use of them is because most of the time, when we read Indian stuff, we either neglect them, okay, or we cherry pick them. One idea of Gandhi, and then immediately you go to something else. I mean, there is a especially. Hello. Yeah, I'll just finish it in 5 minutes time. Yeah. Immediately I go and make something else. I mean, there is a special issue of this journal called Intellectual History, where there are 5 to 6 articles on Gita written by all these people. And most of them are interested in liberalism, these and other, so they will not be able to understand. They will not be able to reach to the text and find out what is unique to it. So I find that most of the time, whether we are cherry picking or worst, we are cherry picking Indian texts. And I think there is a need. There is a lot of things which are, which are not very good, which is not written, systematically. But whatever that is there is very precious. So that's why, I say that for me, working in contemporary Indian philosophy or even Indian philosophy is like rag picking in a diamond merchant's colony. There's a lot of trash, but then suppose if you get a small one diamond, that makes your life. So that is the reason why I think that there is a need to look at these new areas to replenish Indian academics in social science and humanities, and so that we don't make sense only to at a national level. We need to really make sense to the global level. Okay, it's the global level. That should be the target of these things. Yes. So that's so I said written like this to Indian text will contribute to the global academic scholarship, along with rejuvenating our immediate academic agenda. So that's why I have this is a long path, and you have given me very generous time to indulge in not only discuss about Gandhi's radical interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, but also locate it into the national movement figures who are writers and some of them are authors. So that's why I asked Pradeep that it's a long title, but I wanted to cover both of them. So thank you very much for your patience. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Now is a time for question and answer. The first question from Professor N.S. Gundur. He's teaching English literature in Davangere University. How do you respond to Arundhati Roy's critique of Gandhi and his Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah. See, there are two, if you read her preface to Annihilation of Caste, there are two things that that she says, and we need to really pay attention to both the things. One is she finds fault with him, and then she makes a greater case and very convincing case for Ambedkar rather than Gandhi. I quite see the point. But then there is something that she also says, and what is it? That she says that there is nothing that Gandhi has said and not contradicted. There's nothing that he said and contradicted. So what does it mean? That means there is no compact or a comprehensive premise in Gandhi, in her reading. So in fact, I have a quotation somewhere else. I use it quite often. So there is nothing that is that he said and not contradicted. So if the premise of Gandhi is that where there is a premise and also there is anti-premise, opposite of that premise, and that person is not susceptible, is not viable for drawing strong conclusions, such she does. So please remember that she concedes that the premises in Gandhi are not strong or clear or clearly stated. if the premise are not are clear, and then they are contradictory. Okay, how does one draw clear conclusions? Okay, if you say that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, then the premise is very clear. 1 plus 1 is 2 is the conclusion. But suppose if the premise is 1 not 1 is equal to 2 or 1, then that's, I find there's a fault in her argumentative structure. Okay, otherwise, I mean, political correctness and other kind of things, I think she makes a good case.
Professor Ashwath Narayana from Bengaluru University, chairman of history department. His question is, was Gandhi's discourse on Gita was a reaction to the interpretation of Gita by Tilak, especially in Gita Rahasya?
Of course, not just reaction. It is a very, very taking head on. The interesting thing is, if you look at this section of complete works, there he says two things which are very, very remarkable. He says Tilak Maharaj and my political guru, because he has an admiration for him. However, he says that I have clearly, completely, defer, reject not only Tilak, but everybody who interpreted Gita as a text of violence. So it is an instance where one has admiration for his guru, but makes no hesitation in clearly not only disagreeing. I mean, in the last 30 minutes, I have shown you how clearly, step by step, he embarks on supporting his radical interpretation by giving scholarly arguments.
Baire Gowda is asking, I think it is an hollowness of Gandhi accepting Gita on the one hand, praising Buddha on the other as a propagator of ahimsa. He posed as a messiah of ahimsa, but a Sanatanist in heart by accepting Gita as a divine scripture. Is it not contradictory?
It is contradictory, and Gandhi would say that that's it. That's why I said that this is the mistake that we make. That this is the point. That's why, since I know that some of these things are there in all around us, I say that there is a distinction to made between writers and authors. Authors are systematic text writers. Gandhi, not except in this text, in all other text, he's a writer. If you catch him on one thing, okay, yes, you can say that, what you are saying, but there is a lot of other things that he said, you will not be able to touch them at all. Interestingly, we should know that the idea of ahimsa is not to be attributed to Buddha. The idea of ahimsa is there first formulated in a Jaina text called Suyogada. It is in this Jaina text they make a definition very beautifully argued definition of ahimsa, where they talk about application, universality, universalizing your pain to other people and things like that, where they have come up with this very interesting aspect, namely manasa vacha karmanya. So definitely, yes.
Professor S.P. Wageshwari, she is professor in Christ University, Bangalore. The dilemma for historians in India today is the lack of Indian theoretical frameworks to analyze our historical experiences. So we are increasingly dependent on Western theoreticians and schools from deconstructionalists to annals to intersectionality. Request you to respond to this.
See, very good question. The there is nothing wrong in borrowing from others. Suppose I find Derrida useful for me to understand Gandhi. Shamelessly, I borrow Derrida. Because if you reject borrowing, that means you are compromising on learning. Because all learning requires borrowing. You borrow ideas from your teacher, from texts. So don't look at borrowing in a pejorative sense only. Okay, please consider borrowing as in a positive sense also. Okay, so there is nothing wrong in borrowing from anywhere in the world. I shamelessly borrow wherever I find it. If I don't find text in India to borrow, then I borrow. But as I said right in the beginning, I did not find borrowing Derrida useful. I did not find borrowing Gadamer useful because their premise is different from my premise. See, when they are talking about 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, I don't have 1. I have something else. Okay, so when I have something else, then you should not borrow. That means this mindless borrowing is what is, and actually there is a very interesting idea by Anna Arendt called, she has a book called Banality of Evil. It's the banality of borrowing. You know what is the banality? Just like that. It is available. Again, go back to Mullah Nasiruddin. That why are you borrowing? It's available. Why are you searching here? Because there is light. No, that you should stop. But that's not to say that you should not borrow. You should borrow if you have to borrow. If you don't have your own indigenous ideas, make no mistake about borrowing. Second, please remember that there are a lot of people in India who borrowed from their opponents. See, one of the important allegations on Shankara is that he borrowed extensively from Buddhism. There are a lot of work on it. T.R.V. Murthy's work on central concepts of Buddhism, and all other people have shown that the systematic philosophizing that Shankara embarked on in formulating an Advaita school of Indian philosophy has a lot of Buddhism in it. And why not? Why not? What is wrong with it? So I don't think, borrowing is, I don't have that kind of a thing that, there is a Western people, so I will not borrow. No, because as I said that other can also be enabler. See, you have this attitude of not borrowing from outsider because you think that outsider is an oppressor. But I have no problem with the outside. I find that it is possible to borrow from outsiders, and outsiders need not be all the time oppressors. They also can be enabler. I gave the example of Vivekananda and Gandhi.
Question from
Yes, me, Pradeep. One of the things that always fascinates me in doing this kind of work is Indian music, Indian dance, and Indian cinema. Dada Saheb Phalke watched the film on Christ. He wanted to make a film. Now, he did not go and made films, like taking a Western themes. He made a film on Satya Harishchandra, first film. So, the camera is Western instrument, modern instrument. It may not be Western instrument, it's a modern instrument. Now, if you say that, it's a Western instrument, a modern instrument, I will not borrow it from others. You don't have a camera inside in India, so you'll stop making movies. Okay, but if you take instrument from outside, calibrate it for your own purpose. Okay, and then you've seen that we are the one of the contributions of Indian cinema is that unlike Indian academics, where we are dependent on the outside resources, large part of 90% of our intellectual books, journals, things are all dependent on the outsiders. Okay, whereas if you look at the amount of the entertainment of the Indian people, the entertainment is produced by the Indian artists. Okay, we have not done very well compared to these entertainment industry. And then they get into YouTube, and you just look at the classical music of Amir Khan, Kishore Amankar, or Vilayat Khan, and all over the place. They're all using now. The content is Indian, but the format is the Western. So what stops us from doing it? Sorry, I just have to make that.
Question from Srikant BS. How you will describe Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's view on Bhagavad Gita?
See, one thing is that he makes some solid observations and demonstrates that there are 12 gunas in Bhagavad Gita, which are not there in what he calls as Hinduism. Karuna, complete surrender, all these things he says are not there in Hinduism. They all can be traced to Buddhism. But the point is that there is a need to study that very carefully. Very carefully. We have no time to do that. Okay. So there is a research agenda. So I cannot immediately comment on it without studying it properly. Because otherwise, these impressionistic replies have not taken us anywhere. Not even, this impressionistic intervention have not even made us to write articles, even though we are in academics, in regional newspapers, not to speak about national newspapers. That is the state of academics in India today.
So, question from Malinium. Sir, Gandhi was strongly influenced by Thoreau. Was Thoreau and his civil disobedience anyway influenced by Indian Eastern philosophy?
No, Thoreau was not influenced by Indian Eastern philosophy, but Gandhi was influenced by Thoreau. But there is a difference. That is, Thoreau remains as a dissenter in theory. Right? Thoreau has not impacted the politics in the West. Okay, they only read Thoreau, for literary things or making a paper about this thing. But Gandhi, who is influenced by Thoreau, has become a very important political figure, making changes at the level of political practices. So the Thoreau is a very important. Thoreau, Ruskin, and Tolstoy are the very important figures in shaping, in formulating the personality of Gandhi. But the impact of these three people in the West remains as Partha Chatterjee says, remains at a romantic problematic. Whereas Gandhi's impact permeates and penetrates into the political action of nationalism.
Vivek Kumar Radhakrishnan's question. In your book, Debates on Indian Philosophy, you have taken a step further from taking Gandhi as an author to taking Gandhi as a paradigm, as a founder of a discourse. Could you explain how this shift from author to paradigm is harmonious with writer to author, methodically?
See, the idea actually comes, that's why I'm saying I use a lot of Western authors' ideas and things like that. So you find that Foucault makes a distinction between authors and authors of discursivity. Okay? He says that there are several authors. But people like Freud, Darwin, Marx are authors of discursivity. Okay, and why does he say that these are the authors of discursivity? They are authors of discursivity because they not only wrote text, but they have become a precursors for a whole lot of textual writing subsequently. So they are the founders of a new way of looking at things. So they are not just the authors; they have given an umbrella under which a lot of people came to work, extend, modify, reject, critique, and things like that. So this is the very interesting idea that is there um, in Foucault. But I found that that doesn't work in the case of modern Indian thinkers. So I added that I didn't want to get into the authors of discursivity. I found that there is a third variable, which is writers, authors, and authors of discursivity. Okay, so it is in this context, in a very light thing, I'm not more, I want, except in that particular context that you're referring to, I don't want to take it outside that context. My more emphasis is on elaborating on the difference between writers and authors.
Professor Manu Chakravarti from Bengaluru is asking a question. I want you to comment on the major debate between Tagore and Gandhi on the relationship between religion and politics, and on the very practice of Swadeshi, especially as regards Khadi and Charkha.
See, this is the important point. Thanks for asking this thing. See, the relationship between Gandhi and Tagore is a relationship between a teacher and a student. And it is Tagore who called Gandhi Mahatma. When he called him Mahatma, Gandhi realized that he was not at a Mahatma. So he seems to have said that if you want me to be Mahatma when I'm not, you be my Guru. So the person who called Tagore Gurudev is Gandhi. Okay, actually they should have called him as a, for his poetry, Kavi and Kavi Samrat or something like that. So, but he's a Gurudev. So you find that this is one of the wonderful compilations, which unfortunately even this Navajivan Press has not reissued. They're issued with the National Book Trust has issued with Savicharaj Bhattacharya. But that book, before that, there is another book which is beautifully, it's a beautiful title called Truth Called Them Differently. Okay, Prabhu and Kelkar, I think, are the people who edited it. It's a fantastic collection. I request all of you to look at the collection. It's really remarkable collection. Now, what is happening here is that the differences between Tagore and Gandhi are to be seen as a teacher trying to train the student. So I don't look at that relation as expressing differences. No, the relationship on religion and Swadeshi between Gandhi and Tagore is like a teacher setting a question paper and a student answering that thing. Okay, so Tagore sets very strong questions, very, very strong questions, and Gandhi comes up with really brilliant answers. So unlike many people who find this as as a on one plane, both of them are contesting with each other. It is not. It is, I tune it to the hierarchical relation of a teacher and a student, where you find that that comes out very clearly when Gandhi was on fast. And then, if you look at the debate, you find they sometimes call each other names, and they're really, they look as if, they're nasty to each other. They are lifelong enemies, and they will not talk to each other, kind of a thing. That's not correct, because there is an incident when Gandhi, after this famous or infamous fast in Pune, where everybody thought that Gandhi is going to die, and then everybody rushes, including Tagore from Santiniketan, and then Madhav Desai, was a secretary to Gandhi, goes to Gurudev Tagore and asks him that on the occasion of Gandhiji breaking the fast, please sing that poem from Gitanjali, which he likes the most. And then Tagore says that he composed a meter for it earlier, but when he sang it, he forgot about that meter and then sang it never before. So you find that kind of a bond. It is that bond between a great teacher and a very, very successful student that governs the relation, and that should not be seen in as a binary between two contesting views.
There is a question by Srinath BS. Is there a relationship between Manusmriti and Bhagavad Gita?
I have not researched on it, so I will not be able to answer that question.
Okay, sir. So these are the questions. Thank you, Professor, for a delighted session, enlightening session. And we are much privileged, especially Bengaluru Historians Society, Darpana and Rutuman and the august audience who gathered in this session. It's nearly 1 hour 45 minutes, and with 67 to 70 people or audience. Thank you very much for your great talk on Gandhi and Gandhi's idea on Bhagavad Gita. In this occasion, I express sincere thanks on behalf of Bengaluru Historians Society, especially from Dr. S.K. Aruni, who is representing Bengaluru Historians Society, and Hangu Rajesh, he is representing Itihasa Darpana, and Nitesh Kuntadi, he is representing Rutumana.com. And I also express sincere thanks on behalf of the audience who gathered here and who made fruitful this session after asking a lot of very serious intellectual philosophical questions on the topic. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pradeep, for this kind invitation, and thank you all, for this wonderful discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.